In the blistering sands of southern Mesopotamia, nearly 5 millennia ago, a civilization arose whose whispers still echo through the corridors of time. The Sumerians, a people of ingenuity and enigma, etched their lives into clay tablets with a script that would endure far beyond the crumbling walls of their city-states. These were not mere records of trade or law. They were windows into a world that held both the brilliance and the darkness of human ambition. Every cuneiform impression was deliberate, every symbol a fragment of thought painstakingly pressed into wet clay, destined to survive the centuries, buried beneath layers of earth that would protect secrets the human mind could scarcely imagine. For centuries, these tablets remained indecipherable, their language a locked door, their messages shrouded in mystery, taunting historians who longed for understanding. Archaeologists unearthed the Sumerian tablets with reverent hands, dusting away millennia of sediment, and yet for all the painstaking scholarship, the text's full meaning remained elusive. Scholars debated endlessly, translating fragments and reconstructing context, but the language's complexity and the incompleteness of surviving records left vast gaps. What if, however, a machine could look at these symbols without bias, without preconception, and reveal what the Sumerians themselves intended? The thought was audacious, almost heretical, allowing artificial intelligence, the product of our modern age, to interpret the words of our ancient ancestors. This audacity has now become reality. Researchers, armed with powerful AI algorithms capable of analyzing language patterns at scales no human mind could achieve, began feeding these ancient scripts into the digital minds of machines. It was meticulous work, each tablet scanned and converted into data points, each wedge-shaped mark interpreted in its spatial and linguistic context. The AI did not tire, did not forget, and did not carry the assumptions of centuries of human interpretation. It began to produce translations, first tentative, then startlingly coherent, and then chillingly, profoundly unsettling. For what emerged from the machine's computations was not the comforting stories of civilization's dawn, but an almost visceral glimpse into human nature, and the latent darkness that has persisted since humanity first rose from mud and water. Even in this first phase of translation, patterns began to emerge, tales of power, deceit, and ruthless ambition. Social hierarchies more brutal than previously imagined, codified laws that punished not merely the body but the soul, legends that hinted at cruelty, manipulation, and the human capacity for violence, encoded in the very DNA of civilization's first scribes. It was as though the AI, with cold precision, had peeled back layers of cultural romanticism to reveal a humanity that was, in many ways, unchanged across the millennia. Scholars were both enthralled and horrified. The AI had illuminated shadows that had long been obscured by myth and nostalgia. In dusty rooms lit by electric bulbs, surrounded by clay fragments older than most nations, researchers began to confront a truth that was almost unbearable. These texts, silent for thousands of years, were not benign chronicles. They were warnings. They reflected the fears, the obsessions, and the dark ingenuity of a people who, despite the passage of time, were alarmingly familiar. What the AI revealed was a Sumerian civilization aware of its own capacity for destruction, cognizant of the fragility of trust, and painfully attuned to the thin line between order and chaos. The echoes of Sumer reached forward across time, and in them, modern humanity could hear its own reflection, not in the triumphs of history, but in the shadows it often preferred to ignore. As Part 1 draws to a close, the stage is set. We have met the civilization, glimpsed the birth of AI translation, and felt the first tremors of the revelations it brings. The sands of Mesopotamia conceal more than dust and bones. They cradle truths that challenge the very notion of human progress. And in the quiet hum of servers translating millennia-old clay, a story begins, one that will force us to confront the depths of our ancestors' minds, and perhaps the depths of our own. The hum of servers echoed through the dimly lit laboratory, a sound both alien and oddly reverent, blending the mechanical with the monumental. Here, in a room lined with ancient Sumerian clay tablets, cutting-edge technology was performing a task no human could achieve alone, deciphering the language of a civilization that had vanished thousands of years ago. Each tablet, a repository of knowledge, had been painstakingly digitized, scanned at microscopic resolution, and fed into neural networks designed to detect patterns imperceptible to the human eye. The AI, a machine of circuits and code, did not fatigue or falter. It processed thousands of marks per second, cross-referencing symbols, syntax, and contextual clues, building a model of meaning from fragments that had eluded scholars for centuries. Historians watched with a mixture of awe and trepidation. The room was silent except for the occasional rustle of papers or the tap of a keyboard, but within that quiet, something extraordinary was unfolding. These experts, whose careers had been dedicated to painstaking manual translation, could now witness a machine revealing patterns they had only dreamed of discovering. It was not merely speed that amazed them, it was comprehension. The AI began to link disparate tablets, reconstructing incomplete texts, hypothesizing connections between fragments, and revealing sentences that had lain buried beneath layers of temporal decay. This was not translation as they had known it. This was something far more profound, an interpretation that, while machine-generated, hinted at truths hidden for millennia. At first, the results were subtle. Simple trade records, temple inventories, accounts of rainfall and crop yields. But the machine soon uncovered deeper structures within the text, patterns of thought and societal organization that spoke to the human condition itself. The AI detected repetitions, symbolic metaphors, and linguistic nuances that pointed toward moral, ethical, and political systems far more sophisticated and far more ruthless than previously understood. Where human scholars had glimpsed fragments, the machine revealed a tapestry of intention. It became clear that these were not mere historical curiosities. They were reflections of a civilization acutely aware of its own capacity for complexity and cruelty. Early reactions were cautious. Historians debated the reliability of machine interpretation, questioning whether AI could truly grasp the subtleties of Sumerian culture. Could a series of algorithms understand irony, fear, or ambition encoded in cuneiform? Could it detect the emotional resonance behind a law punishing theft or a hymn praising a distant king? But as the translations accumulated, the hesitation gave way to a reluctant astonishment. The AI consistently produced coherent and contextually plausible renderings, revealing a society governed by hierarchies of power and codes of morality, both rigid and brutal. These translations carried an uncanny resonance, a voice from the past that seemed to speak directly to the modern observer, as if the Sumerians themselves were whispering through the machinery of the present. The true revelation, however, lay not merely in the content, but in the process itself. The AI's ability to discern linguistic patterns across thousands of fragmented tablets allowed researchers to reconstruct narrative threads that had been invisible to traditional scholarship. Stories emerged of political machinations, social stratification, and moral dilemmas that mirrored, with unsettling fidelity, the complexities of modern civilization. What had once seemed like the distant, abstract concerns of a long-extinct people suddenly became immediate and recognizably human. There was a stark, almost uncomfortable clarity in how the AI connected dots across centuries, revealing the universality of ambition, fear, and desire. In private moments, some scholars admitted to an unexpected unease. The AI had stripped away centuries of comforting mythologizing, leaving behind the raw, unfiltered voices of Sumerians confronting the eternal questions of human existence. Ambition and cruelty were not merely present in their myths, they were embedded in their records, articulated with a precision that was frighteningly familiar. In feeding the tablets into the machine, humanity had unwittingly invited a mirror from the past, one that reflected not only ancient civilization, but the persistent shadow of human behavior. And within that mirror lay the foreboding suggestion that the darkness encoded by the first scribes had not faded. It had simply evolved, waiting to be understood, and perhaps to be recognized. As Part 2 closes, the boundary between past and present begins to blur. The AI, a silent intermediary, has become the key to a lost language, translating not just words but ideas, emotions, and warnings. Humanity is learning, through a machine, that the Sumerians were observers of themselves, and in doing so they have inadvertently forced modern humans to observe themselves too. The stage is set for what comes next. The actual revelations, the disturbing truths that will challenge everything we thought we knew about the dawn of civilization and the constancy of human nature. The air in the research chamber had grown heavier, as if the centuries-old dust from the Sumerian tablets had seeped into the very minds of those who studied them. What the AI revealed now was no longer mere administrative records or dry rituals. It was a portrait of human nature in its rawest, most unsettling form. With every translation, the veneer of antiquity peeled away, exposing a civilization as meticulous in cruelty as it was in creation. The Sumerians, it appeared, had not simply chronicled their lives. They had encoded their fears, obsessions, and darkest impulses into the clay. And now, millennia later, a machine was exposing these hidden truths with brutal clarity. The first revelations were subtle yet chilling. Laws that demanded the punishment of entire families for the transgressions of a single member. Contracts that bound servants in ways that stripped them of identity. Temple hymns that celebrated conquest, domination, and the suffering of enemies with eerie poetic elegance. The AI, untethered by empathy or morality, pieced together fragments that human scholars had previously dismissed or misinterpreted. It recognized patterns of hierarchy and exploitation, detecting the structural cruelty embedded within everyday life. These were not isolated incidents. They were deliberate, systemic designs, a society that had codified power, fear, and control into its very foundation. Stories emerged of political intrigue that rivaled any modern thriller. Kings who manipulated allies and enemies alike, priests who wielded religious authority to enforce obedience, and city-states locked in cycles of betrayal and warfare. The AI revealed subtleties in wording that hinted at premeditated deception, strategies of manipulation, and the moral calculations of a civilization acutely aware of the consequences of its actions. Each translation added another layer, constructing a world where ambition and cunning were not merely tolerated, they were revered. The Sumerians, through the AI's lens, appeared terrifyingly pragmatic, their morality entwined with survival and dominance. Yet perhaps most disturbing were the glimpses of psychological insight that surfaced. The AI traced repeated motifs of fear, guilt, and obsession. Tablets recounted instances where leaders anticipated rebellion, where citizens feared divine punishment, and where human relationships were defined less by empathy and more by leverage and coercion. The cuneiform symbols, once mute, now spoke with a voice that was disarmingly familiar. Human emotions, ancient yet immediate, seemed unchanged by millennia. The Sumerians had observed themselves, and by extension humanity, as a species capable of both creation and destruction, love and cruelty, progress and self-destruction. And the AI, in its cold analytical precision, made no judgment. It merely reflected these truths back to the modern observer. The implications were staggering. If a civilization from the dawn of recorded history had encoded such clarity about human nature, what did that mean for us today? Could the patterns of fear, ambition, and cruelty traced in cuneiform tablets still echo in modern society? Scholars found themselves confronted not with history alone, but with a mirror reflecting contemporary humanity, suggesting that some aspects of our nature are enduring, almost immutable. The AI translations did not simply illuminate the past. They forced a confrontation with the present, showing that human behavior, despite technological advancement and societal evolution, might still be guided by the same impulses observed by scribes thousands of years ago. For many, the emotional impact was profound. Some researchers wept quietly, overwhelmed by the recognition that the foundations of civilization were entwined with both brilliance and brutality. Others sat in stunned silence, unable to reconcile the machine's clinical precision with the human horror it exposed. These were truths too vast, too intricate, and too unnervingly accurate to ignore. The AI had done more than translate. It had unearthed a chronicle of existence, one that revealed the enduring shadows of human ambition and the delicate balance between order and chaos. As Part 3 closes, the narrative shifts from discovery to reflection. The Sumerian civilization, long silent, has spoken through the medium of AI, and what it says is uncomfortable, illuminating, and deeply unsettling. Humanity, it seems, is not so different from its ancestors. And the revelation of this darkness, hidden in clay and code, sets the stage for the next inquiry, to understand what these insights tell us about ourselves today, and how ancient warnings might still resonate in a modern world teetering between enlightenment and devastation. The clay tablets, once silent and unyielding, now carried voices that transcended millennia. What the AI had revealed in the previous phase was not merely historical fact, but a psychological map of humanity itself. The Sumerians, through the precise recording of their lives, fears, and ambitions, had inadvertently mirrored the patterns that still govern human behavior today. The same ambitions that drove kings to conquest, the same rituals of obedience and coercion, echoed through our modern institutions, our societies, and even within the private corridors of the human mind. It was as if the ancient scribes, observing themselves with meticulous care, had sketched an enduring blueprint of our species, a blueprint we continue to follow, whether knowingly or not. Modern scholars began to see connections that were simultaneously enlightening and disturbing. Political hierarchies, social stratification, and the pursuit of power that shaped Sumerian city-states had striking parallels in today's world. The AI had decoded patterns of favoritism, corruption, and manipulation, demonstrating that these were not anomalies of human history, but constants. Leaders of the ancient world, like leaders of the modern, had understood the dynamics of fear and ambition, the power of perception, and the fragile loyalty of those they ruled. By reading the Sumerian texts, contemporary humans were forced to confront a profound question. Had we learned anything at all from our past, or were we merely repeating the same patterns under different guises? The emotional revelations were equally striking. Tablets chronicled not only political machinations, but intimate human relationships, alliances, betrayals, familial tensions, and the universal desire for recognition and respect. The AI, in analyzing subtle linguistic cues, highlighted recurring motifs of envy, obsession, and moral conflict. Researchers realized that these impulses were neither unique to the Sumerians nor to any era. They were intrinsic aspects of human nature. It was as if the AI had lifted a veil, revealing the continuity of human experience across time. ambition and fear, love and cruelty, hope and despair, woven into the fabric of society, unchanged and unchanging. But beyond observation, there was an almost prophetic quality to the revelations. Certain texts contained warnings couched in myth or legend, stories of societal collapse, overreach, and self-destruction. The Sumerians had documented the consequences of unchecked power, the fragility of civic trust, and the ethical dilemmas that arise when survival conflicts with morality. Through AI's lens, these warnings became eerily relevant, suggesting that the lessons of 5,000 years ago still resonate today. Humanity, in all its sophistication, had not escaped the fundamental challenges that shaped its earliest civilizations. We were, in essence, still dancing to the same ancient rhythm. This realization sparked debates that transcended academia. Philosophers, psychologists, and social theorists examined the AI translations, grappling with the implications for morality, ethics, and governance. If human behavior has remained consistent over millennia, could we ever truly evolve? Could technology, rather than merely observing, guide us toward better decisions? The Sumerians, in documenting their own darkness, had inadvertently provided a mirror, an opportunity for reflection. And yet, the mirror was uncomfortable, forcing humanity to face truths it might prefer to ignore, that the impulses which led to creation and civilization also carry the seeds of cruelty, exploitation, and conflict. The emotional weight of these insights was palpable. Researchers often found themselves staring into the tablets, feeling the intimacy of a world long gone yet intimately familiar. The AI, in its unerring precision, had not merely translated words, it had illuminated the enduring complexity of human existence. And in doing so, it forced the modern observer to confront a duality, the brilliance of human innovation alongside the darkness that has perpetually shadowed it. The Sumerians, through their meticulous recordings, offered more than historical knowledge. They offered a lens through which to examine the human soul. As Part 4 draws to a close, a profound truth emerges. The past is not distant. It is a reflection, a guide, and a warning. The AI translations bridge the gap between millennia, connecting modern humanity to its earliest recorded self. And in those connections lies both caution and opportunity. By understanding the impulses, fears, and ambitions of our ancestors, we may begin to recognize the same forces within ourselves, and perhaps, for the first time, confront them with awareness. The story of the Sumerians is no longer just a story of history. It is a story of humanity itself, seen through the eyes of those who lived it, and now mirrored back by the impartial gaze of a machine. The hum of the servers was no longer merely a backdrop. It had become the pulse of discovery, a reminder that the past and present were converging in ways previously unimaginable. The AI, in its silent and tireless calculations, had revealed not just history, but truths about human nature so stark that they challenged the very foundations of ethics and morality. Researchers who had initially approached this project with academic curiosity now found themselves staring into an abyss, a place where technology and conscience collided, where the pursuit of knowledge raised questions as profound as the revelations themselves. At the heart of this ethical tension was the realization that artificial intelligence, while a powerful tool, was not neutral. Though it translated the cuneiform symbols with precision, it did so without judgment, without empathy, and without context beyond the data it processed. The AI revealed patterns of cruelty, ambition, and systemic oppression, but it could not interpret them morally. It merely reflected the reality encoded in the tablets. The question arose: by using machines to decode human history, were we confronting truth, or were we merely amplifying the darkest elements of our past? Could a civilization's mistakes, filtered through a machine, become a blueprint for understanding, or for misinterpretation? The ethical dilemmas extended beyond interpretation. Scholars debated whether AI should continue to process fragments of history that might be disturbing or even destabilizing. If ancient texts reveal aspects of humanity that we are unprepared to face, do we have the right to uncover them? Was there a danger in knowing too much, in letting machines lift the veil on centuries of hidden human behavior? And what responsibility did we bear for the knowledge once it was revealed? For the AI did not merely translate, it exposed vulnerabilities, patterns, and truths that humanity had long ignored, or at least hoped to ignore. Some philosophers argued that the act of using AI in this way was itself an ethical experiment. By allowing a machine to interpret human history, we were testing not only the accuracy of our knowledge but the limits of our moral courage. The Sumerian tablets, encoded with warnings and human imperfection, now forced modern humanity to confront its own ethical frameworks. Could we handle the reflection the AI provided? Could we learn from the past without repeating its errors? Or would our fascination with technological capability blind us to the moral consequences of revelation? The ethical abyss deepened when researchers began to realize the implications for modern society. The patterns of manipulation, power and ambition encoded in the tablets were not confined to history. They resonated with contemporary politics, social structures, and personal relationships. If AI could so accurately decode the impulses of an ancient civilization, could it not do the same with modern human behavior? The very tool that had illuminated the past now hinted at a future where privacy, autonomy, and moral decision-making might be scrutinized and quantified with the same relentless precision. The line between revelation and intrusion, between understanding and control, had grown perilously thin. Yet amidst the tension, there was also hope. The AI's translations offered an unparalleled opportunity for reflection, education, and ethical growth. By confronting the unvarnished truths of our ancestors, we could recognize the persistent patterns of human behavior and perhaps take conscious steps to mitigate them. The ethical challenge was not in the machine itself, but in how humanity chose to respond. Knowledge without wisdom could be dangerous, but knowledge approached with humility, scrutiny, and moral responsibility could become a guide, illuminating paths that had long been obscured by time and denial. As Part 5 concludes, the abyss is both a warning and an invitation. The AI has revealed the unfiltered essence of human nature, past and present, forcing us to question the morality of our choices and the trajectory of our civilization. We are confronted with a profound responsibility to observe, understand, and act with ethical awareness, lest the patterns of history repeat with even greater sophistication. The Sumerians left their warnings inscribed in clay. The AI has merely amplified their voice, reminding us that the true test lies not in knowledge alone, but in the moral courage to confront and apply it. The Sumerian clay tablets, once buried and silent beneath layers of sand and time, have now spoken with unprecedented clarity. Through the lens of artificial intelligence, humanity has glimpsed not merely the history of a long-extinct civilization, but a mirror reflecting its own enduring impulses, fears, and ambitions. The revelations are sobering. A civilization that understood the fragility of trust, the power of ambition, and the consequences of ethical compromise, yet still succumbed to cycles of manipulation, violence, and moral compromise. These lessons, encoded in clay and unveiled by AI, are not relics of a distant past. They are warnings written for us, the inheritors of history, urging reflection, humility, and awareness. As modern observers, we are confronted with the continuity of human nature. The Sumerians documented ambition and cruelty with precision. They chronicled joy, creativity, and devotion alongside envy, fear, and obsession. In doing so, they provided a template for understanding both the heights and the shadows of civilization. Today, as we face technological, social, and political challenges, the parallels are impossible to ignore. AI has not merely translated ancient language, it has translated human behavior across millennia, revealing that the struggles, errors, and moral dilemmas of our ancestors are not distant echoes but living lessons, embedded in our collective psyche. The ethical responsibility is clear. Knowledge alone is insufficient, it must be coupled with reflection and moral courage. The AI has illuminated the pathways of history, revealing the consequences of unchecked ambition, hierarchical oppression, and ethical compromise. Yet it also offers hope. By recognizing these patterns, humanity can act deliberately to avoid repeating them. Understanding the past is not a passive endeavor, it is a call to action, a challenge to acknowledge our weaknesses, harness our creativity, and cultivate systems of justice, empathy, and foresight that transcend the failures of our ancestors. Moreover, the fusion of AI and ancient knowledge carries profound implications for the future. Machines can reveal patterns too vast and subtle for human comprehension, but they cannot dictate ethical choices. That responsibility remains squarely in human hands. The Sumerians left clues about their society, but we must interpret, contextualize, and act upon them wisely. Their warnings are universal. Power without accountability leads to ruin, ignorance of human nature perpetuates suffering, and the failure to learn from history condemns societies to repeat it. AI has amplified their voice, making the warnings impossible to ignore, but the choice to heed them belongs to us. As the sun rises over modern cities, casting shadows that echo ancient streets of Eridu, and Uruk, the lesson is unmistakable. History is not a static record, but a living guide. By studying the Sumerians through AI, humanity gains not only insight into a civilization long vanished, but also clarity about itself. The revelations of ambition, cruelty, innovation, and moral conflict are reminders that human nature is enduring, complex, and neither inherently virtuous nor irredeemably corrupt. Our survival, progress, and moral evolution depend on our willingness to confront this truth with honesty and humility. In the final moments, the message becomes deeply personal. Each observer, scholar, and viewer is challenged to reflect on their own role in the ongoing story of humanity. The Sumerians, speaking across 5,000 years, ask us to recognize our power and our limitations, to learn from the past, and to navigate the present with awareness and responsibility. The AI translations have illuminated the darkness, but they have also highlighted the light, the potential for human ingenuity, empathy, and ethical growth. The ultimate lesson is simple yet profound. We are the inheritors of a legacy, a continuum of human endeavor, and the choices we make today will echo into the future, just as the clay tablets echo into our present. The story concludes with a quiet but undeniable truth. History is alive, and its lessons are timeless. The Sumerians, through AI, have reached across millennia to speak directly to us, and the message is unmistakable. We are bound to our nature, but we are not imprisoned by it. By learning, reflecting, and acting wisely, humanity has the chance to shape a future that honors the brilliance of our ancestors while transcending their shadows. The echoes of Sumer are no longer distant. They are here, within us, demanding awareness, humility, and courage.